3 months later, Marcus pulled his motorcycle into the parking lot of Pinnacle Studios in Burbank. He was wearing a crisp black security uniform with Statham Security Solutions embroidered on the chest pocket. The irony of working for a company that bore the name of the man he had once tried to fight was not lost on him, but it had become a source of pride rather than embarrassment. The job Jason had helped him get had turned out to be everything promised, and more. Frank Morrison, the owner of the security company, had been impressed with Marcus's work ethic and his ability to handle difficult situations without escalating them unnecessarily. Within 6 weeks, Marcus had been promoted to team leader, and he was now responsible for coordinating security for major Hollywood productions. Today's assignment was particularly special. He was working security for the premiere of Jason's latest action film, The Reckoning. It would be the first time Marcus had seen the actor since that life-changing encounter in Malibu, and he was both nervous and excited about the reunion. As Marcus walked toward the theater entrance, he reflected on how much his life had changed. Not only had he found steady, well-paying work, but the job had given him a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. He was good at protecting people and managing crowd control, and he took genuine pride in doing his job well. The financial stress that had been crushing him for months was now a thing of the past. He had caught up on his rent, made all his motorcycle payments, and even started putting money aside for the future. More importantly, he had gained something he had not realized he was missing: self-respect. The premiere was a major Hollywood event, with hundreds of celebrities, media representatives, and fans gathered outside the theater. Marcus coordinated with his team to ensure that everyone stayed safe, while still allowing the fans to see their favorite stars. Around 7 o'clock, a black SUV pulled up to the red carpet entrance. Marcus watched as Jason Statham stepped out, looking sharp in a tailored black suit. The crowd erupted in cheers and camera flashes as the star waved and smiled for the photographers. Jason was accompanied by several other people, including his publicist and his agent, but Marcus was surprised to see a familiar golden shape trotting along beside the group. Buddy was wearing a small bow tie and seemed completely comfortable with all the attention and chaos surrounding him. As Jason made his way down the red carpet, signing autographs and posing for pictures, Marcus found himself admiring the actor's professionalism and patience with his fans. Every person who approached him was treated with courtesy and respect, even when the crowd became overwhelming. Near the end of the red carpet, Jason's eyes met Marcus's across the crowd. For a moment, the actor's professional smile was replaced by a genuine grin of recognition. Jason said something to his publicist, then walked over to where Marcus was standing. "Marcus," Jason called out, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "Frank tells me you're his best team leader. I knew you'd do well." "It's all thanks to you giving me that chance," Marcus replied, feeling genuinely grateful. "I can't tell you how much that phone call changed my life." "You changed your own life," Jason corrected him. "I just made a phone call. You're the one who showed up every day and proved you were worth the opportunity." Buddy had spotted Marcus and was wagging his tail enthusiastically. The dog clearly remembered their friendship from the past few months. Marcus had made it a point to visit Jason's house several times to check on Buddy and make sure he was fully recovered from that unfortunate first encounter. "Hey, Buddy," Marcus said, kneeling down to pet the golden retriever. "You look very handsome in your bow tie." The photographers had noticed Jason talking to one of the security guards and were snapping pictures of the interaction. Marcus started to feel uncomfortable with all the attention, but Jason seemed completely relaxed about it. "Don't worry about them," Jason said quietly. "This is actually good publicity for Frank's company. Having me chat with his security team makes it look like we're all friends, which we are." A reporter from Entertainment Tonight approached with a microphone and camera crew. "Jason, can you tell us about your relationship with the security team? You seem to know them personally." Jason glanced at Marcus, silently asking if he was comfortable being interviewed. Marcus nodded. He had nothing to hide, and he was proud of the work he was doing. "This is Marcus, one of the best security professionals I've ever worked with," Jason said to the camera. "He's the kind of guy who takes his job seriously and really cares about keeping people safe. Frank's company is lucky to have him." The reporter turned to Marcus. How long have you been working in celebrity security? About 3 months, Marcus replied honestly. It's been an amazing experience. Every day is different, and I get to work with some really talented professional people. What's the most challenging part of the job? The reporter asked. Marcus thought for a moment. Honestly, the hardest part is remembering that celebrities are just regular people who happen to have famous jobs. You have to protect their privacy and safety without making them feel like prisoners. It's a delicate balance. Jason smiled approvingly at this answer. It showed that Marcus had really understood what the job was about. Not just standing around looking tough, but actually understanding the human element of security work. After the interview, Jason walked with Marcus toward the theater entrance. The red carpet portion of the evening was wrapping up, and it was almost time for the movie screening to begin. I have to ask, Jason said quietly. How are you doing personally? I know the job stress is gone, but are you handling everything else okay? Marcus appreciated the question. In the month since their first meeting, Jason had checked in on him several times, always making sure that Marcus was adjusting well to his new life and not falling back into old patterns of anger and frustration. I'm doing really well, Marcus said honestly. The job gave me back my confidence, but more than that, it taught me something important about how to treat people. I watch how you interact with fans and reporters, and I try to bring that same respect and professionalism to everything I do. That means a lot to hear, Jason replied. You know, that day we met, I was prepared to really hurt you if necessary, but I could tell you weren't a bad person. You were just someone having a bad day who made a poor choice. I'm glad I was right about that. As they reached the theater entrance, Marcus realized that this chance encounter had taught him lessons that went far beyond just finding a new job. He had learned about accountability, forgiveness, second chances, and the importance of treating others with dignity regardless of their circumstances. Jason, Marcus said, as they prepared to part ways for the evening. I know I've thanked you before, but I need to say it again. You didn't just help me find work. You helped me find myself again. I'll never forget that. Jason clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Just promise me you'll pay it forward someday. When you meet someone else who's struggling and needs a hand up, be the person who gives them that chance. I promise, Marcus said, and he meant it completely. As Jason headed into the theater for his movie premiere, Marcus returned to his security duties with a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just doing a job. He was part of something bigger, something that mattered. Marcus stood there for a long moment, still processing everything that had just happened. His side ached where Jason had hit him, and his pride was completely shattered. But something else was happening too. For the first time in years, Marcus was looking at his own behavior with genuine self-reflection. You could have really hurt me, Marcus said, touching his ribs gingerly. Why did you hold back? Jason bent down to pet Buddy, who was now wagging his tail cautiously. Because the point wasn't to destroy you, he replied. The point was to stop you from hurting my dog and teach you that actions have consequences. Mission accomplished. This response surprised Marcus. In his experience, when someone won a fight, they usually gloated about it or tried to humiliate their opponent even further. But Jason seemed genuinely uninterested in rubbing his victory in Marcus's face. I've seen all your movies, Marcus admitted sheepishly. I always thought the fight scenes were just Hollywood nonsense. I never imagined you could actually do all that stuff for real. Jason laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to lighten the tension between them. Well, some of it is movie magic and stunt doubles, but I do my own fighting whenever the insurance company lets me. After 20 years of action films, you pick up a few tricks. Marcus looked down at Buddy, who was now sitting calmly next to Jason's feet. The dog's tail was wagging slowly, and he showed no signs of fear or aggression despite what had happened earlier. This made Marcus feel even worse about his earlier behavior. He's a good dog, Marcus said quietly. I can tell he trusts you completely. Buddy's the best friend I've ever had, Jason replied, scratching behind the dog's ears. I rescued him from a shelter 3 years ago. He was scheduled to be put down because nobody wanted an older dog with some health problems, but he's got the biggest heart of any creature I've ever met. This information hit Marcus like a physical blow. Not only had he kicked an innocent animal, but he had kicked a rescue dog who had already suffered enough in his life. The guilt was almost overwhelming. "God, I'm such an idiot," Marcus said, running his hands through his hair. "Here I am, complaining about my problems, and I take it out on a dog who's been through worse things than I can imagine." Jason studied Marcus's face and saw genuine remorse there. In his years in Hollywood, Jason had become pretty good at reading people and determining who was sincere and who was just putting on an act. This biker seemed to be experiencing a real moment of self-awareness. "What kind of problems are you dealing with?" Jason asked. It was not just curiosity. Jason had learned that sometimes people acted badly because they were struggling with issues they did not know how to handle. Marcus hesitated. He was not used to opening up to strangers, especially not to famous movie stars who had just beaten him in a fight. But something about Jason's direct, no-nonsense manner made him feel like he could be honest. "I lost my job 2 weeks ago," Marcus admitted. "The construction company I worked for went out of business. I've been doing this work for 15 years, and now I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm behind on rent, my bike payment, everything. I was coming to see a friend about maybe finding some work, and I was just angry at the whole world." Jason nodded thoughtfully. He had grown up in a working-class family in London, and he remembered what it felt like to worry about money and job security. Even now, with all his success, he never forgot where he came from. "That's rough," Jason said simply. "Losing work is one of the worst feelings in the world. It messes with your head, makes you feel like you're not worth anything." Marcus was surprised by the understanding in Jason's voice. "Yeah, exactly. And then I see all these nice houses and expensive cars, and I start thinking about how unfair everything is. That's not an excuse for what I did, but that's where my head was at." Jason was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. "I might be able to help with the job situation," Jason said. "I've got a friend who runs a security company. They're always looking for guys with military or construction backgrounds. The pay is decent and the work is steady." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "You would do that for me? After what I did?" "Everyone deserves a second chance," Jason replied, already dialing the number. "Besides, you apologized, and I can tell you mean it. That counts for something." While Jason made the phone call, Marcus looked around the neighborhood with new eyes. These houses still represented wealth that was far beyond his reach, but he was no longer angry about that fact. Instead, he was thinking about how one moment of poor judgment had almost cost him much more than he realized. "Frank? It's Jason," he heard the actor say into his phone. "I've got a guy here who might be good for your team. Former construction foreman, knows how to handle himself in tough situations. Yeah, I can vouch for his character." Marcus felt tears starting to form in his eyes. 6 months of unemployment and financial stress had worn him down to the point where he had forgotten that there were still decent people in the world. Now here was someone who had every reason to hate him, and instead Jason was trying to help him get back on his feet. After a brief conversation, Jason hung up the phone and turned back to Marcus. "Frank says he can meet with you tomorrow morning, if you're interested," Jason said. "It's security work for movie sets and celebrity events. The hours can be long, but the pay is good, and there's room for advancement if you're reliable." "I don't know what to say," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Jason shrugged as if the answer was obvious. "Because that's what decent people do for each other. You made a mistake, but you owned up to it. Now you get a chance to do better." Buddy had wandered over to Marcus during the conversation and was now sniffing curiously at the biker's boots. This time, Marcus reached down slowly and let the dog smell his hand. After a moment, Buddy's tail started wagging, and he allowed Marcus to pet him gently. "Hey there, boy," Marcus said softly. "I'm really sorry about before. You didn't deserve that." The golden retriever seemed to understand that this man was no longer a threat. Dogs have an amazing ability to forgive and move on from bad experiences, and Buddy was already treating Marcus like a potential friend rather than an enemy. "He likes you," Jason observed with a smile. "Dogs are pretty good judges of character. If Buddy trusts you, That tells me you're fundamentally a good person who just had a bad moment. Marcus continued petting Buddy, marveling at the animal's capacity for forgiveness. It was a lesson he knew he needed to learn himself, both in terms of forgiving others and being worthy of forgiveness when he made mistakes. Marcus staggered backward, his vision blurry and his lungs burning as he struggled to breathe. The 2 punches had happened so fast that his brain was still trying to process what had occurred. One moment he had been throwing what should have been a fight-ending punch, and the next moment he was gasping for air and seeing double. Jason stepped back and gave Marcus a moment to recover. This was not cruelty. It was calculated strategy. Jason wanted the biker to understand exactly how outmatched he was before deciding whether to continue the fight or accept defeat gracefully. "Still want to do this the hard way?" Jason asked, calmly, not even breathing heavily despite having just delivered 2 precise strikes. Marcus shook his head to clear his vision and felt a surge of humiliation and rage. He had never been handled so easily in a fight, and his ego could not accept what had just happened. In his mind, he had simply been caught off guard by a lucky sucker punch. There was no way this ordinary-looking guy could actually be a better fighter than him. "You got lucky," Marcus wheezed, still struggling to catch his breath. "Let's see how you do when I'm ready for you." Jason sighed quietly. He had hoped that a quick demonstration of his capabilities would end the confrontation, but clearly this biker was too stubborn or too proud to learn from experience. Jason had met plenty of men like Marcus over the years, guys who confused physical size with fighting ability and who would rather get beaten unconscious than admit they were wrong. Marcus charged forward, this time keeping his guard up and trying to use his weight advantage to overwhelm his smaller opponent. He threw a series of heavy punches, each one designed to do serious damage if it connected, but none of them connected. Jason moved like water, flowing around Marcus's attacks with an ease that seemed almost supernatural. He ducked under wild swings, sidestepped lunging punches, and deflected the few strikes that came close to hitting their mark. To any observer, it would have looked like Marcus was fighting his own shadow. This was the result of decades of professional training. Jason had worked with fight choreographers who demanded hundreds of takes to get a single scene perfect. He had sparred with professional martial artists, boxers, and mixed martial arts fighters. His body had been conditioned to react to attacks, with speed and precision that far exceeded anything a street brawler could achieve. After letting Marcus exhaust himself with a dozen missed punches, Jason decided to end the one-sided contest. He waited for Marcus to throw another wild haymaker, then stepped inside the biker's reach and delivered a short, sharp punch to Marcus's liver. The liver shot was a technique Jason had learned from professional boxers. It was not flashy or dramatic, but it was devastatingly effective. The punch shut down Marcus's central nervous system like flipping a switch, sending waves of nausea and pain throughout his entire body. Marcus collapsed to his knees, clutching his side and retching. The fight was over, and they both knew it. Jason stood over the defeated biker, not showing any sign of satisfaction or cruelty, just the calm professionalism of someone who had done what needed to be done. "Are you ready to listen now?" Jason asked quietly. Marcus could only nod weakly. The pain in his side was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and he was beginning to realize that he had badly underestimated his opponent. This was not some lucky amateur who had gotten in a few cheap shots. This was someone with serious training and skills. "Good," Jason said, reaching down to help Marcus back to his feet. Despite having just beaten the man senseless, Jason was not vindictive. He believed in using only as much force as necessary to solve a problem, and the problem appeared to be solved. Marcus accepted the helping hand, though he was still too winded and hurt to stand up straight. He leaned against his motorcycle for support and looked at Jason with new eyes. There was something familiar about the man's face, but Marcus's head was still too foggy from the beating to place where he might have seen him before. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious now about the identity of the man who had just dismantled him so easily. Jason smiled slightly, the first time his expression had softened since the confrontation began. "The name's Jason Statham." Marcus's eyes went wide as recognition finally dawned on him. He had seen dozens of Jason Statham movies over the years. The Transporter was one of his favorite action films, and he had always admired the tough guy characters that Statham played on screen. You're actually him, Marcus said, his voice filled with disbelief. I just tried to fight Jason Statham. Yeah, you did, Jason replied with a slight chuckle. And now you know how that turned out. Marcus felt his face burning with embarrassment. Not only had he been beaten in a fight, but he had been beaten by one of Hollywood's most famous action stars. The irony was almost too much to bear. He had called Jason a Hollywood pretty boy, while having no idea that he was talking to someone who was probably tougher than 99% of the people Marcus had ever met. I can't believe this, Marcus muttered, shaking his head. I kicked Jason Statham's dog. Buddy, who had been watching the entire confrontation from a safe distance, cautiously approached the two men. The golden retriever seemed to sense that the immediate danger had passed, and his natural friendly nature was beginning to reassert itself. Jason knelt down and gently examined his dog, running his hands over Buddy's ribs and legs to check for any serious injury. The dog whimpered slightly when Jason touched the spot where Marcus had kicked him, but there did not appear to be any broken bones or internal damage. He'll be okay, Jason said, more to himself than to Marcus. But he's going to be sore for a few days. Marcus watched this tender interaction between the action star and his pet, and felt a wave of genuine remorse wash over him. Seeing Jason's obvious love and concern for the animal made Marcus realize how cruel and unnecessary his actions had been. I'm sorry, Marcus said quietly, and for the first time, he really meant it. I was having a bad day, and I took it out on your dog. That was wrong. Jason looked up at Marcus, studying the biker's face to determine whether the apology was genuine. After a moment, he seemed satisfied with what he saw. We all have bad days, Jason said, standing back up. The question is what we do about it afterward. Marcus looked at the man standing before him and let out a short laugh. The guy was clearly upset about the dog, but Marcus was not about to be intimidated by some random neighbor. He was 6 feet tall and had spent years working construction, building muscle and a tough attitude to match. Your dog? Marcus said, revving his motorcycle engine slightly to make his point. Maybe you should keep your mutt on a leash then. I don't want some flea bag scratching up my bike. Jason's eyes narrowed, but he kept his voice controlled. This was a skill he had learned both from his acting training and from his younger days, when getting into street fights was a regular occurrence. He knew that staying calm while his opponent got angry often gave him the advantage he needed. The dog wasn't hurting anything, Jason replied evenly. He was just being friendly. There was no reason to kick him. Marcus swung his leg over his motorcycle and stood up to his full height, trying to use his size to intimidate this smaller man. He had dealt with plenty of complainers over the years, and he found that most people backed down when he showed them he meant business. Look, buddy, Marcus said, taking a step closer to Jason. I don't know who you think you are, but I'm not going to stand here and get lectured by some Hollywood pretty boy. That dog came after my bike, and I defended my property. If you don't like it, call the cops. The mention of Hollywood pretty boy made Jason's eyebrow rise slightly. Most people in the neighborhood knew who he was, but apparently this biker had no idea he was talking to someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of screen combat. I'm not interested in calling the cops, Jason said quietly. I'm more interested in teaching you some manners. Marcus burst out laughing at this. The idea that this average-looking guy in jeans and sneakers thought he could teach him anything was ridiculous. Marcus had been in plenty of bar fights and construction site brawls over the years, and he had never met anyone he could not handle with his fists. You want to teach me manners? Marcus said, his voice getting louder. You in what army? I eat guys like you for breakfast. What Marcus did not realize was that Jason Statham had been studying martial arts since he was 12 years old. Before his movie career took off, Jason had been a competitive diver for the British national squad, which required incredible physical discipline and body control. When he transitioned into action movies, he had trained with some of the best stunt coordinators and fight choreographers in the business. More importantly, Jason did not just learn movie fighting. He studied real combat techniques. He had worked with military advisors, special forces trainers, and martial arts masters to make his on-screen fights look authentic. Over the years, those skills had become second nature to him. "I'm going to give you one chance to apologize to my dog and walk away," Jason said, his voice still calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of warning. "After that, we're going to have a problem." Marcus looked around the quiet street and realized that they were essentially alone. A few cars were parked in driveways, but he could not see anyone else outside. This seemed like the perfect opportunity to teach this mouthy neighbor a lesson about respecting his betters. "Apologize to a dog?" Marcus said with a snort. "You must. Be out of your mind. Why don't you run along home before you get hurt?" Meanwhile, Buddy the golden retriever had managed to limp his way back toward Jason. The dog was clearly in some discomfort from the kick, but his loyalty to his owner was stronger than his pain. Buddy sat down next to Jason and looked up at the biker with wary eyes, staying close to the man who had always protected him. Seeing his dog's condition made Jason's anger spike, but he channeled that emotion into focus rather than blind rage. This was another skill he had learned from his years of professional training: how to use anger as fuel without letting it control his actions. "Last chance," Jason said, his stance shifting almost imperceptibly into a more balanced position. To Marcus, it just looked like the man had adjusted his footing, but Jason was actually moving into a combat-ready stance that would allow him to react quickly to any aggressive move. Marcus decided he had heard enough talking. In his experience, guys who talked tough usually folded quickly when things got physical. He figured one good punch would put this neighborhood hero in his place and send him running home to call his lawyers. "You want some of this?" Marcus said, raising his fists in a classic boxing stance. He had done some amateur boxing in his 20s and was confident in his ability to throw a solid punch. Jason did not raise his fists in response. Instead, he simply stood there looking relaxed and ready, his arms at his sides. This confused Marcus, who had expected the other man to either back down or square up for a fight. "You sure about this?" Jason asked one final time. There was something in his tone that should have warned Marcus that he was making a serious mistake, but the biker was too angry and too confident to notice. Marcus threw the first punch, a straight right hand aimed directly at Jason's face. It was a good punch, thrown with proper form and plenty of power behind it. In most street fights, it would have ended the confrontation immediately. But Jason was not like most people Marcus had fought before. The actor moved with lightning speed, ducking under the punch and stepping to the side in one fluid motion. Marcus's fist sailed harmlessly through empty air, and his momentum carried him forward and off balance. Before Marcus could recover, Jason struck back. His first move was a quick jab to Marcus's solar plexus, delivered with surgical precision to a nerve cluster that would temporarily paralyze the biker's diaphragm. Marcus gasped and doubled over, suddenly unable to catch his breath. Jason's second strike was an uppercut that caught Marcus under the chin as he bent forward. The punch was not thrown with maximum power. Jason did not want to seriously injure the man, but it was more than enough to snap Marcus's head back and leave him seeing stars. Marcus revved his motorcycle engine as he pulled into the quiet neighborhood of Malibu. The leather jacket stretched tight across his broad shoulders, and his heavy boots made solid contact with the pavement as he came to a stop. He had been riding for 3 hours straight from downtown Los Angeles, and his patience was wearing thin from the heavy traffic and blazing California sun. The street was lined with expensive houses, their manicured lawns and luxury cars telling the story of wealth that Marcus could only dream about. He worked as a construction foreman, earning enough to pay for his small apartment and his beloved Harley-Davidson, but nothing more. The motorcycle was his pride and joy, a 2018 Street Glide that he had saved for 2 years to buy. As Marcus checked his phone for directions to his friend's house, he noticed a small golden retriever wandering near the sidewalk. The dog appeared to be alone, sniffing around some trash cans without any owner in sight. Marcus barely glanced at it, more focused on finding the right address. His friend Tony lived somewhere on this street, and Marcus was already running late for their planned barbecue. The golden retriever, curious and friendly as most of his breed tend to be, trotted over toward Marcus and his motorcycle. The dog's tail wagged enthusiastically, and he let out a few happy barks. To the dog, this was just another interesting visitor to investigate in his familiar neighborhood. Marcus, however, was not in the mood for friendly animals. The long ride had left him irritated and sweaty. When the dog came closer and started sniffing around his motorcycle, Marcus felt a surge of annoyance. He had spent hours cleaning and polishing his bike just that morning, and the thought of dog hair or scratches on his pristine machine made him angry. "Get away from my bike," Marcus shouted at the dog, but the golden retriever only tilted his head and continued wagging his tail. The dog had no understanding of Marcus's frustration and simply saw this as a potential new friend who might want to play. Without thinking clearly, Marcus swung his leg and gave the dog a sharp kick to its side. The kick was not gentle. It came from a man who weighed over 200 pounds and wore heavy motorcycle boots. The dog yelped in pain and surprise, stumbling backward from the force of the blow. The golden retriever looked up at Marcus with confused and hurt eyes, no longer wagging his tail. He whimpered softly and backed away, clearly not understanding why this stranger had hurt him when all he wanted was to be friendly. Marcus immediately felt a pang of regret. He was not usually cruel to animals, and the dog's innocent expression made him realize he had overreacted, but his pride prevented him from showing any sign of remorse. Instead, he turned his attention back to his phone, trying to locate Tony's house number. What Marcus did not know was that he was being watched. From the large window of a beautiful modern house across the street, a man had witnessed the entire incident. This man was not just any ordinary resident of the neighborhood. He was Jason Statham, the famous action movie star known for his tough guy roles in films like The Transporter and Fast and Furious. Jason had been enjoying a quiet afternoon at his Malibu home, sipping coffee and reading through some movie scripts. He loved the peaceful atmosphere of the neighborhood and the fact that he could relax without being bothered by crowds of fans or paparazzi. The house provided him with the privacy he craved after spending months on movie sets around the world. When Jason saw the biker kick the golden retriever, his blood began to boil. But this was not just any dog. This was Buddy, Jason's own beloved pet who had somehow gotten out of the backyard again. Buddy had a habit of digging under the fence and exploring the neighborhood, despite Jason's best efforts to keep him contained. Jason's hands clenched into fists as he watched Buddy limp away from the motorcycle. The actor had rescued Buddy from an animal shelter 3 years earlier, and the dog had become like family to him. Jason often said that Buddy was one of the few creatures in Hollywood who loved him for who he really was, not for his fame or money. Rising from his chair with the fluid motion of someone trained in martial arts, Jason headed toward his front door. His jaw was set in a hard line, and his eyes had taken on the same dangerous look that audiences recognized from his movies. The difference was that this time, it was not acting. Jason had grown up in a tough neighborhood in London long before his success in Hollywood. He knew how to handle himself in a fight, and he had zero tolerance for bullies who picked on those weaker than themselves. Whether it was a person or an animal, Jason believed that protecting the innocent was not just the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do. As he walked across the street toward Marcus, Jason's mind was already calculating the situation. The biker was bigger than him, probably stronger, and definitely younger. But Jason had something that Marcus did not: years of professional fight training, discipline, and most importantly, righteous anger on his side. Marcus was still studying his phone when he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up to see a man walking toward him with purpose and determination. The man was average height with a shaved head and was wearing simple jeans and a t-shirt. To Marcus, he looked like just another neighbor, probably coming to complain about the noise from his motorcycle. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, his tone already defensive. He was used to people complaining about his bike, and he was prepared to tell this stranger exactly what he thought about noise complaints. The man stopped a few feet away from Marcus and crossed his arms. "Yeah, you can help me," the stranger said in a calm but cold voice that carried just a hint of a British accent. "You can explain to me why you just kicked my dog."